No indication that it was related to the government and that it came from Money Network cardholder services. All right, so you can see why there's a red flag there, but it is supposed to come in a plain envelope, the cardholder agreement, get an ATM pen, etc.
You and your family money, like the newly increased child tax credits.
The child credit that's currently at $2,000 is...
It says some $563 million in relief checks will be mailed by December 17th. The checks total anywhere from $600 to $1,100. Another 3,000 payments will be direct deposits. This money comes from federal and state pandemic aid to help struggling California residents who earned less than $75,000 in 2020.
We have a ton of information about the Ford stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI, and SSDI. There's a ton of information about this, and here's what you need to know right now. In March, the lawmakers approved the American Rescue Plan. This helped so many people across the United States. So a massive spending bill, it was designed to provide retail to and relief during the crisis. Now that bill allowed for a third round of checks worth up to $1,400 apiece, and it also boosted the child tax credit in a huge way. Prior to this, a maximum value of $2,000 per child, and only a portion of that was refundable. The child tax credit was already partially refundable before 2021, but last year it just became more refundable. Plus, half of the child tax credit was paid in monthly installments. So lawmakers are now hoping to keep this bill, this part of the stimulus checks, in place for next year as well, so they can continue the monthly payments into 2024. And given the way that inflation has surged this year, it would be a great thing for cash-strapped families who are facing difficulties with maxed-out credit cards. But unfortunately, the enhanced version of this credit didn't go as approved. However, lawmakers are still pushing for the bill to be passed. The enhanced child tax credit has helped many families shore up their finances. It also led to a notable decrease in food insufficiency and child poverty rates. Once the boosted credit went away, the bulk of that progress was reversed. That's something that lawmakers have noticed. It's why so many people are still fighting back to get some sort of boosted version of the child tax credit. It may not look exactly the same as the boost as it was in 2021, but it's still something better than nothing. And according to the latest report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a key measure of inflation, wholesale prices rose by 10% in October from a year before. While still historically high, it was the smallest increase since July. It is the second inflation report this month to show signs of cooling and the rising prices that have plagued the economy. Economists expect that the producer price index will measure price paid for goods and services properly before they reach consumers, and that's to show an annual increase of 8.3%, down from September's revised 8.4%. And on a monthly basis, producers rose 0.2% below expectations, and even with the revised 0.2% increase in September, it's not helping too many people. Last week, the CPI index showed inflation slowed to 7.7% to 8.2% year over year. Now, the Fed vice chair says that this was reassuring, and it signals that the rate hikes appear to be taking a hold. And so, now with the crisis coming still around the United States, millions of people are dealing with this consequence. For several months, stimulus checks were mailed and deposited, and the crisis is inflation and nothing else besides inflation. The U.S. federal government approved these payments, and they served as a lifeline for millions of people to get. So, the good news is that many states are joining in on this and helping so many people with these crisis inflation relief checks is what we want to call it. The governor of New York, for instance, said that this relief package is making good on our commitment to help hardworking New Yorkers through a nationwide affordability crisis. And the program put money back in the pockets of nearly 2 million New York families that are struggling to make ends meet. So it's good to hear that some people are dealing with the crisis properly. Over 1 million low-income New Yorkers have received tax relief, and even some people are getting $270 inflation relief checks. If you're eligible, you don't have to do anything. Checks will be mailed to you, and you'll probably get it in the mailbox or even in your bank. Not only that, folks, but listen to this. According to CNN, white-collar workers will be hit harder than blue-collar workers if the United States enters a recession. Economists say that the crisis shifted things around and has accelerated automation, and it's pushing white-collar workers out of jobs. In this post-crisis environment, businesses are restructuring themselves and they're changing the way they operate. So, who knows?
Is that over the course of the last decade, the resources available to the IRS have been simply gutted, and it's meant it doesn't have the capacity to enforce our tax laws as they apply to high-end evaders. So what's happened is that the audit rates at the top of the wealth and income distribution have fallen off far more quickly than the audit rates of those at the bottom. And that is simply utterly unfair. And it doesn't address the tax gap estimated at $7 trillion over the next decade. That tax gap reflects underpayment by high-income taxpayers. So we very much hope that Congress will provide the long-term assured funding that the IRS needs to hire those professionals who have the skills and are able to.
Are stimulus checks going to be sent out immediately, everybody? Well, here's the latest developments on that. Many of you guys are wondering what the new timeline is for the next round of stimulus checks. Well, there have been several new changes to President Biden's fourth stimulus bill, so you want to watch to the end of the video to find out if you're eligible for the fourth stimulus check. President Biden actually told reporters today that he is not concerned about a recession in the immediate future. This was just hours after the Commerce Department announced that the US economy shrank 1.4% at the beginning of 2022. That marks the worst quarter in 2 years. Gross domestic product, which is also known as GDP, is the broadest measure of goods and services produced across the economy. The Commerce Department has said that the gross domestic product shrank by 1.4% on an annualized basis in the 3-month period from January to March. Economists expected the report to show the economy had expanded by 1.1%, but instead, it marked the worst performance in the spring of 2020, when the US economy was still deep in the recession. When asked about how concerned he is about the prospect of a recession given the GDP report, President Biden said, "I'm not concerned about recession. The GDP fell to 1.4%, and here's the deal, we also had last quarter consumer spending and business investment increase at significant rates." President Biden also stated, "We're in a situation where we have a very different view than Senator Scott of Republicans that want to raise taxes on the middle-class families and want to include half of small business owners." The president was referring to a tax plan rolled up by Senate Republican Rick Scott, which the advisor said would increase taxes on millions of middle-class Americans and would phase out Social Security and Medicare. Senator Scott rolled out the plan in February, calling it the 11-point plan to rescue America. Now, this proposes raising income tax on Americans. Now, Mitch McConnell has actually shut down the Scott's proposal, and McConnell said Republicans will not have the proposal as part of our agenda, a bill that raises taxes on half the American people. The GDP numbers also come after inflation numbers released early this month revealed a new 4-decade high in March, as the world crisis fueled rapid price gains for oil and gas. The Consumer Price Index rose 8.5% in March from a year ago, according to the Labor Department. That was released early this month. Now, the CPI, which measures a levy of goods ranging from gasoline and healthcare to groceries and rent, jumped 1.2% in 1 month period from January. Now, Californians can also receive billions of dollars in tax rebates later this year as the state's budget surplus continues to grow. State Senate leaders released an extensive list for spending the windfall, and it's now estimated to be as high as $68 billion. That staggering figure is the high end of a projection from the nonpartisan Legislative Analyst Office, which in January put the number far lower at $29 billion. At the top of the spending list is